Hello everyone and welcome to Veteran Gaming. I'm Aaron and today I'm talking to you about Elden Ring. I put together a Weapons 101, if you will, a very general and broad guide to the different weapon classes available in Elden Ring. There are a metric ton of weapons in Elden Ring, and frankly, you can beat the game with almost any of them. So I put together a guide for beginners that don't really have an idea what available weapon classes there are, or a specific road they might want to go down as they play through Elden Ring. So I've tried to throw a bunch of weapons out there, some of the pros, some of the cons to each weapon class. That way you guys have a general idea of, oh, I want to try that out. Ooh, I like that move set. So hopefully this video helps. And while I still have you, please click the subscribe button. It's just a click for you, but potentially life-changing for me. So if you like the content, leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and good luck, guys. So let's talk about Daggers.
He's got a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Here's a couple of examples that I've pulled up on this particular character. As you can see, pretty much all falling under the slash and pierce category of damage. Some of them are going to give you physical with magic, some are just purely physical. Some, like the Erd Steel Dagger here, you can throw an Ash of War in to change the effect. Your attribute scaling down here, this one has strength, dex, faith. Got some other ones with intellect. And some have passive effects down there, like the Reduvia causes blood loss buildup, which is real nice. So daggers are pretty customizable. There's one with Scarlet Rot. You can do a lot of different things with them. Some quick pros and cons include, for pros, they're very quick. They can strike before an enemy can attack most of the time in their animation. They have high critical damage for backstabs. And because they strike so quickly, they can set status effects such as bleed, frostbite, poison, scarlet rot, all that kind of stuff. Anything that requires a build-up, they can put in there pretty quickly. Cons, they have low damage compared to a lot of other weapon types. They have little to no stagger, even though they do interrupt, which is nice. But they do also have very low range. Not really utilized in PvP unless you have something like the Bloodhound Step that can get you in and out of combat very quickly. But the low range is a problem in PvP and PvE. So overall, it's a bit tougher to build around, but if you get the right kind of blood or scarlet rot or poison stacking on the weapon, you can use them really effectively, especially with summons. That'll help distract a boss. You can go in the back, wail on them. You're going to end up doing a ton of damage. All right, moving on to straight swords, axes, and hammers.
No, give me that. You have the little one.
All right. We'll start with straight swords in this particular category. As you can see, there are lots of straight swords in this game. A lot of them are very customizable also. You see this first four here, all can add their own Ash of War. Here you're getting into physical and magic damage. Here you're getting physical, magic, and fire damage with the Sword of Night and Flame, as well as attribute scaling across both intellect, faith, dexterity. The coated sword's interesting. It has actually pure holy damage. You're going to get quite a variety here in the straight sword category. If we scroll down a little bit, we can look at some of the axes here. Axes look like they're pretty even as far as attribute scaling for strength and dexterity. I mean, you're obviously going to find the odd arcane axe or something in there. But again, those first four all can be added to an Ash of War. So you can change the scaling a little bit, do some kind of bleed up if you want. I actually only have one hammer on this character because hammers are in general a little lackluster in this game. So this one's customizable and you can dual wield them if you wanted to, if you end up finding two of them. But those are just some examples in the categories. Here I have the coated sword equipped and a shield. You can also dual wield. That's the ornamental sword on the other hand there. So I prefer to use them with a shield. The block mechanic is just really good in this game, as I can show you here probably, if I can get this guy to stab me just right. But there we go. And then bam. Just the one block and the strike, and that's all you need. I think shields are really underrated in this game. They're excellent for taking out really annoying creatures like rats and dogs. So this style of weapon has some real pros to them here. Some of which are they have decent range, decent damage, and decent speed. As you can imagine, as kind of a middle of the road weapon length, weapon type, that you're going to have kind of middle of the road damage, range, and speed. Some come with really awesome Ashes of Wars and powers, like the Sword of Night and Flame does a lot of really cool effects, and some of the other ones do also. They also work well with shields in the offhand, as well as staves and seals if you want to do some spells in one hand or switch to a shield real easily. They all do a great job with that. Some cons for these are, they're not the best range, they're not the best damage, they're not quick to stagger, and not quick to hit compared to some other weapons. But if you want a good middle-of-the-road weapon that does nothing exceptionally well, but does really well across the board, then maybe a straight sword, axe, or hammer could really do the trick for you. They're very versatile. You can use them in a lot of different build types. They're not going to crush any single category, but like I said, good across the board. All right, so moving on to great swords. As you can see here, there are a ton of great swords in the game, and they are great, no pun intended, weapons. As you can see, this whole top row here, you can add an Ash of War, so you can add different effects to them if you want, but you got a little bit of everything in this category: strength, dexterity, faith, intellect. Some have standard passive effects like frost buildup. Some of them you can add through the Ashes of War. I'm currently selected here with the Blasphemous Blade, which does physical and fire. This is actually a boss weapon. It is outstanding. So some pros and cons here for the great swords. They have very good damage, very good range, and you're starting to get some stagger value. They're good for dual wielding with that move set, but they can also be paired with a shield. And there are some phenomenal Ashes of War on some of them, including the Blasphemous Blade, which I'll go ahead and show you real quick on this poor unfortunate soul who just got erased by that magma stream. Some cons are they have a slower swing, obviously, since they're a larger weapon now. You're getting a slower speed on them, but you're getting some improved range on it. They are slower to build up status effects. Obviously, that's again pairing with the fact that it is a slower attack, and they're not quite as easy to use with an offhand like the shield that I'm currently using here. So a lot of people either dual wield them or two-hand them, but you can make anything work depending on your build. Overall, it's a really strong class that can stagger, pile up some massive damage, both with their basic attacks and with their Ashes of War. And they are still versatile enough to use in several build styles like I showed you. There's Faith, there's Dexterity, there's Arcane, there's a little bit of everything. So you can probably find a great sword that's going to fit what you need. Alright, let's talk about Colossal Swords and Colossal Weapons for all the strength fans in the audience today. Here you can see a couple of the Colossal Swords. Scroll down here and find, here we go, Colossal Club, Hammer styles, Axe styles, Staff styles, a little bit of everything. Most of them have very high strength requirements, obviously, since they're colossal weapons. Makes sense. But there's also some dexterity, some intellect. Same thing you're going to find with multiple weapon types. They require a little bit of everything, depending on what your build is. The one thing you want to remember when you're wielding colossal weapons, great swords also, your strength. You are actually going to gain strength for your character, essentially, if you two-hand the weapon. So as you can see here, I've unselected the Troll's Golden Sword, And if you look to the side over here, the strength requirement is 29, and I only have 23. So when I select this to use, it's going to come up and say, unable to use this item effectively with present attributes unless wielded by both hands. So even though I don't have the strength to use it one-handed, if the game allows me to, I two-hand it. Now I'm doing full damage with it because I'm two-handing, and it's going to give me strength. So you're actually getting, if you two-hand it, you're getting 1.5 times your current strength, which would give me enough to utilize this weapon properly. So, some pros for the Colossal weapons. Obviously, you're getting a huge amount of damage from these things and a very high range. They can be dual-wielded, which is only going to increase your damage. And they have Ashes of War that can be added to make the damage even higher with buffs. And they also build up stagger very quickly, especially if you're jumping with heavy attacks, because again, these are colossal weapons. Of course, they're going to stagger an enemy quickly. The downside is, as you can see, they are very, very, very slow. It's easy for enemies to not only dodge, but to interrupt. They're also very slow to build up status effects, and they're not typically very versatile. They take large amounts of strength to wield them. It takes large amounts of endurance to continue to swing these massive weapons. So you're going to need high quality or high numbers in both strength and endurance to wield these properly for long periods of time. One pro I will throw out with the most recent patches, as you can see here, I'm guarding or blocking. With the most recent patch, these weapon classes actually do a lot of damage mitigation through the block. So I'll pull it up real quick. As you can see here, damage mitigation is 76%. That is huge. There are shields in this game that don't do 76% damage mitigation. So there's now really no point to ever pair it with a shield. Not only do you get the strength added from two-handed and the damage, but now you're also getting the damage mitigation if you do need to block. So all in all, a great weapon for putting out big-time damage, but it takes a lot of skill to wield properly and to not get massacred while you're doing these big, slow, heavy swings. Moving on to the thrusting swords. I only have 2 currently in my inventory, but that's enough to get by with what we're talking about here. So we got the heavy thrusting sword. Again, you're going to be looking mainly at strength and dexterity scaling. Ashes of War can be placed on there, so you can change it to bleed affinity or heavy or keen or whatever you want to do with it, which is real nice. So the one major thing I want to talk about with the thrusting swords is how awesomely they pair with shields. So as you can see here, I'm going to run up to this fine gentleman. I'm going to make him mad, but look, I can block and strike at the same time. I'm still blocking all mitigating damage, and that guy does nothing to me. You can do the same thing with spears, but obviously the thrusting swords, since they're smaller, are going to be quite a bit quicker. So I can just sit here and pokey poke from around my shield. He can't do anything to me. I'm taking absolutely no damage. So pros, obviously, very quick little attacks that can interrupt. They work incredibly well with shields. They do build status effects decently well, because as you can see there's 2 real quick lightning fast strikes. And then again, 1, 2, 3 real nice attacks. So you can do those status build-ups with bleed or rot or whatever you want to do. Some cons are they do have a little bit of lower damage. There aren't very many options of them in the game. And they don't really do a whole lot of stagger. They interrupt well, but not a ton of stagger. So overall, it's a versatile weapon class that can be used in multiple build and play styles. But if you love being able to mitigate damage while attacking, I mean, this is a great weapons class, especially for dogs, rats, any of those really, really annoying creatures that attack very, very quickly and often. They can't do much when they're eating shield and sword at the same time. So again, really versatile, really fun, really helpful. So here we go with curved swords. Some of the best weapons in the game at setting up status effects like bleed. As you can see here, I got Scavenger's curved sword in one hand, Serpent God's curved sword in the other. Both of them can add an Ash of War to do bleed or rot or poison. And actually the Scavenger's curved sword comes with blood loss already built into it. There are a pretty decent amount of them in the game. Shamshir, Beastman's curved sword. You also have curved great swords. Bloodhound's Fang is one of the best weapons in the game. You can get it very early with very little effort, and you can beat the game with its sword. It's so good. Some of the other ones are boss weapons, but these weapons do well across the board. One of the attacks where you're going to get a lot of the buildup is the jump attack. As you can see there, that's 4 hits in the air. So you're going to do 4 strikes. That's really going to get that build up going. Your move set here with the two-handed, you're going to get multiple attacks every single time, which is why these weapons are the little ones, not the great swords usually, but the little ones are specifically used two-handed most of the time, just because you're going to be playing a style that's going to go and try to get that bleed build up. Some of the other pros, they have the sweeping attacks, so you can hit multiple enemies with them, which is always nice. They're very customizable. Some of them come with some cool Ashes of War, and you can also change the Ashes of War. Some of the cons are middle-of-the-road stagger. Their basic damage isn't necessarily the highest, and again, they're not great at causing stagger. They're mostly utilized in two-handed sets, like I said, and I will show you a little bit here. See, we're getting a bunch of damage proc in here, so they can be interrupted, they can be blocked, but especially if you've got some summons out to distract the boss, you're doing those, you're going to build up bleed or rot, whatever, build up so quickly that it's really a strong weapon. Used in PvP, used in PvE, does a fantastic job. So these are some great weapons that you can get early and utilize well. Moving on to katanas. There aren't a whole ton of katanas in the game, but man, are they strong weapons. Some pros include quick moveset, can be dual wielded or two-handed for great damage. They're really good at getting status effects to build up, and some have some amazingly good Ashes of War, like the Rivers of Blood or Melania's Katana later in the game. They're very customizable, as you can see here on the screen. I set this Uji Katana up as poison, so I'm getting the passive effects of both poison and blood loss build up. But as you can see here, everyone but the Dragon Scale Blade actually comes with some kind of passive build-up already built into the weapon. So as you can see here, I'm dual wielding. You got a nice move set where you're hitting multiple attacks. They do really good damage. They have good range, especially the Nagakiba, that, as you can see, is hugely long. Some talismans out there also help these weapons a lot, especially with the ones that do like bleed, extra attack power if there's a bleed effect or rot effect in the area. And they're also some of the coolest looking weapons in the game, which, you know, never hurts. Some cons are not a ton of stagger build up with these weapons. Some of the best katanas can't really be customized quite as much. You know, they're locked into that bleed effect. But these weapons are clearly a favorite of the developers of the game. The katana weapon class is very powerful. Several of them can be customized a little bit, like I showed you with the poison build-up, and they can just be really devastating. It was actually hard to find cons for this weapons class because across the board, they're very strong, very versatile, and can help you out throughout the entire game. Moving on to twin blades. It's another weapon class that there aren't a ton of throughout the game, but man, they do some amazing things. So as you can see here, the Godskin Peeler, one of the best twin blades in the game, can throw Ash of War on there to get bleed, Scarlet Rot, any of that kind of build up here. Can do the same on the Gargoyle's twin blade. Eleonora's you cannot change, but it does come with blood loss build up. You can use these in either hand. You can two-hand them. Either way, they do some great work. Some pros include great at setting up status effects because, as you can see here on the screen, like on the jump attack, you're getting multiple strikes in the air, and that's what's going to cause that bleed build up to do a giant chunk of their damage. Again, several talismans include AR, or attack power, excuse me, when you're setting a status effect in the area, just like the Katanas. And they're some of the coolest looking weapons in the game. I mean, who doesn't want to look like Darth Maul and have these giant death sticks in each hand? Some cons include slow initial strikes, which can be interrupted sometimes. They don't have the best pure damage, and it seems like you mostly have to two-hand or dual wield them to get the most use out of them. You're not really going to do a whole lot with a shield or something in the other hand. But in general, they're a really powerful weapon, especially if you build properly around them. As you can see there, I already had a bleed proc build up just with that one jump attack. So considering there aren't that many of them in the game, it does limit your build options. But if you build around these things, man, they can really put a hurt on the enemies. So moving on to some of our longer weapons here, talking about some spears, halberds, the occasional reaper in there. These weapons have phenomenal reach, obviously, a little bit slower on the swing speed. And I know that they have different move sets, so it's kind of hard to lump them all into the same category, but there's so many weapon types in Elden Ring that it's also very difficult to talk about every single style. So I'm lumping them together. So again, pros, the spears especially work well with shields. The halberds and the reaper not quite as much. You're probably going to want to two-hand them. But that's fine, because if you two-hand them, they can do a lot of damage, and they are good at building stagger. Some cons include a slower attack speed than some of your smaller weapons. They're not really great at building status effects, obviously, because you're having a very slow swing speed. And they have higher stat requirements due to the size, so they're not quite as versatile as some of the smaller weapons. But one amazing part, especially here with the spears, you can attack around the side of your shield while holding your shield. So you can mitigate a ton of damage while doing damage, which I'll go ahead and demonstrate here on this poor guy. So going to block all his damage, but I'm going to swing the whole time anyway. Yep. Okay, that was an unfortunate block there. But in general, if he swings at me, no damage. I'm just swinging around the side of it, which is really handy for dogs, rats, imps, any of those really annoying creatures that attack very, very quickly. So, although they have a higher stat requirement, these weapons are solid foundations for many build types, and you can lean into several damage types, like this weapon right here I'm using as Madness build-up. And they have some fun Ashes of War, as you can see here too. So, again, just another weapon that has some good reach, good damage, and multiple different play styles. Good overall weapon. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Rihanna's favorite weapon class, the whips. In general, they look pretty cool. They have some fun Ashes of War. They have very good range, as you can see when it flails out there. And they can set status effects, especially when you dual wield them. The cons include not really great damage. They're not really good at building stagger, and they need practice to use effectively because you can't really see the extent of the weapon. You can't see the extent that it's going to flail out there. as you can using most normal weapons. So you can use them in PvP, you can use them in PvE, but frankly, you're going to be really, really hoping on those bleed procs and poison to carry the damage, because they're just not going to do that much on their own. But they can be fun, especially in PvP, because nobody really understands how the attacks are going to come out or how far they land. So if you want to be a bit of a wild card, maybe whips are for you. Alright, now for a really fun weapon class, the fists and the claws. These weapons have incredibly fast attacks. They pretty much are exclusively dual wielded, and most of them you can dual wield after finding just one, which I'll show you in just a minute. And they are great at setting status effects and interrupting, because again, they strike incredibly quickly. The cons are they're usually pretty dexterity focused because they are quick weapons. They are incredibly short range, obviously, since they're basically, I mean, this is just something covering your fist, so there's no range on that. And they don't really do much stagger damage, but they look really cool. They can do a ton of damage, especially with the status effects. And like I said, they're just a ton of fun. So here we go. And the trick is you have just your one fist weapon or claw weapon right here. If you hold your use button and click your attack, there you go. Now you are dual wielding. And again, I'll show you real quick. You can do that with any of these claws and fists. So there's just my one. And there's my two. And here you go to town. Again, they're incredibly fast. Most of them you're going to want to try to get some kind of bleed damage on, since bleed is crazy in this game. And bam, 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 just so fast, you're going to get your bleed proc. These guys can't even really, look at that, he was mid-animation, I've already got 3 or 4 swings out. So really quick, you got to be really in close to get them, but they can do some powerful damage and really get those status effects rolling. So a fun class overall. Alright, our final weapon class we're going to talk about would be the bows, crossbows, and ballista. These are mainly going to be used to aggro single targets out of groups. Certain weapon types here can set status effects, which are real nice based on the arrows you use or how quickly they can attack. They can also disable traps and activate hiding enemies. And a couple of cons include it's really hard to make this your primary damage type. Can it be done? Yes, but you're still probably going to have to utilize a lot of summons, which if that's fine, go for it. Like I said, it can be done. You also have to constantly build or craft arrows, which isn't ideal. So you got to make sure you have those at all times. And it's slow to fully charge your shots sometimes, which can be frustrating also. So it's really difficult to make your primary damage type, but it is really useful as a tool. So, you know, just aggro this guy here real quick, swap over your weapons, and then now I'm fighting just this guy and none of his friends, which is really helpful, especially if you got one of those little horn blowing dudes up there that'll activate a large mob. Now I can pick them out, pick them off, and continue on. So a great tool, really hard to build all the way around, but for a lot of builds, you definitely want a bow of some kind with you. So there you go, everyone. You've successfully passed Weapons 101 for Elden Ring. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns about any of the weapon classes or styles that are out there, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Also, if you know there's a weapon out there you want a specific guide for with build ideas, how to use it properly, let me know. I'll see what I can do for you. Other than that, please hit the subscribe button, the like button if you like the content, and other than that, good luck.